All right, so let's talk about the Cowboys. Breaking news: Kellen Moore has been made a scapegoat.
Everybody needs a good scapegoat.
Everybody, and we've seen what happened in Denver. I mean, you're paying a guy too much money to blame the quarterback. So coaches and it's sad that the way the game has evolved, coaches are more expendable than players and high ticket players. I'm not ready for the Cowboys to just ship Dak out on the next plane out and send him somewhere else packing. But the clock's ticking, man. I mean, he's a phenomenal player, but you got to shore some shit up, or we're going to have to go with somebody else. But I'm not ready to blame Kellen Moore either.
That's kind of how I feel, because sometimes the Cowboys offense looks amazing. Sometimes it's shit. Like when Dak Prescott came back from his injury, the Cowboys, I believe, after that point were the highest scoring team in the league, or one of the top three scoring teams in the league. Like they were incredible. But Dak Prescott, like turning the ball over, could be like maybe the offense isn't creative enough, but the fact that you're putting up more than 30 points a game, like you're doing something right. You just have to not make bad decisions at bad times. So that falls back on Dak. So like you said, the clock is ticking on Dak. Obviously, Kellen Moore, he's out, mutual parting of ways. He's only been with the Cowboys as a coach. So it sounded like he wanted to branch out. They wanted to move on, try something different. Good situation. He's with the Chargers, and we'll talk about them soon. But for the Cowboys, you're sticking with Dak because he's getting paid so much and you just paid him. But if he's not in an MVP conversation in the next couple of years, if he doesn't at least make it to an NFC Championship game and be competitive, there's going to be a lot of conversation about him getting released. Like kind of like a Derek Carr. I feel like the conversation that people talk with Derek Carr, that'll be the Dak Prescott conversation in 2-3 years from now, if he doesn't prove that he can win more, because the roster around him pretty loaded. I feel like I say that all the time. For everything everybody wants to say about Jerry Jones, he puts some pretty damn good teams together. And especially right now, they have what they need. Maybe Dan Quinn goes off, be head coach somewhere else. Doesn't sound like that's going to be the case. So I think he's going to be back with the Cowboys leading that defense, and they have a bunch of guys on both sides of the ball. So it's going to be a big offseason for more soul searching than it is talent finding for the Cowboys, because they have to find a way. I mean, I guess we say the same thing every year, and they do the same thing every year. They have to find a way to finally be able to get back to the prominence that they once were.
So I agree with everything you said, but the one thing you left out, I didn't hear you say Mike McCarthy. Yeah, there's a good possibility that this falls on his shoulders. A lot of people gave Tony Romo a lot of shit when he was a quarterback for the Cowboys. But you and I have talked about this before. I firmly believe you put Tony Romo in another system with another coach. Tony Romo's a pretty damn good quarterback. And so Tony Romo's reputation as not being able to win a playoff game came from the gaffe he made in the playoff loss when his coach was Bill Parcells. And then Parcells left, and he had played for an inferior coach under Jason Garrett. Could just win just enough games to keep his job. This roster is loaded. Almost any mediocre to good coach could win a lot of games with this roster. And I'm not so sure that Mike McCarthy shouldn't be on the hot seat. And I'm not so sure if they do this again next year, Mike McCarthy might not be on the hot seat. And it might go from being suddenly cold to scorching, and he's ejected off of it. I mean, Jerry Jones doesn't have patience for this kind of shit. And if they have a season like next year, like they had this last year, and then they lose in the first round of the playoffs again, he might not have a job on Monday. I mean, it might come that quick.
Yeah, truly. Because look, when it comes down to Mike McCarthy, and I'm glad you brought that up, because if you think about all the times over the last 2 seasons that we've had to talk about time management situations that Mike McCarthy has completely botched. Like, this is a guy that has 15 years of head coaching experience, not just coaching in the NFL experience, head coach experience. You've been doing this. Figure it out. At some point, you have to get it right. And the penalties. Penalties. Like when as a Colts fan, I can remember the Colts-Cowboys game. That game was close for a portion of it because the Cowboys kept getting penalties. And then in the fourth quarter, they stopped getting penalties and they scored 33 points. Like, penalties are the reason, or a big reason, why they've lost their last two playoff games that they lost. You think about 2021, they got bounced because, or 2021, 2022 playoffs, they got bounced because of penalties. And the same thing happened this year. They have a bunch of penalties. They wind up losing the playoff game. So and that comes from coaching, and I learned that from you.
Yeah.
You've told me that a million times, and I've noticed that, and it happens with the Cowboys over and over again. And when you can't fix that stuff, that all points back at the head coach. And this probably would have been pretty good offseason to figure out a new head coach. There aren't a whole lot of opportunities, and there are a whole lot of really good assistant coaches looking to be head coaches. So, it probably would have been good a time to do it this offseason, but you're exactly right. If these gaffes keep happening and then they lose again in the playoffs or don't even make the playoffs next year, Mike McCarthy probably going to be out.